Over the past decade, Minecraft has graced us with what could be considered some of the best updates and some of the worst. And in the later part of that decade, it seems like the updates have been hit or miss. When they hit, they really hit, and when they miss, boy do they miss.
Look how they mess with my boy.
I think the best example of a hit would be the Nether update. They took a once barren wasteland that had nothing to offer, and they completely changed it up. No longer were you just coming to the Nether like it was a 7-Eleven at 2 a.m.
Yeah, let me get a pack of blaze rods, a gas tier, and, oh yeah, 20 on pump 3.
Once that update came out, I felt a lot more inclined to build a base in the Nether and actually explore. Like, there was a reason to explore now. There was multiple biomes, there were treasures to find. It was a great update. This is exactly what the game needed. They took a dimension that had nothing but lava, fortresses, and red, and they made it this immersive, biodiverse world that felt like it was lived in. With that in mind, I think that there's an entirely different dimension in Minecraft that fits the pre-overhaul criteria. Barren, and only used to collect a few items. That's right, we're talking about the end. The end dimension, for all intents and purposes, is, well, the end. It's the final bastion of the game itself. It's where the Ender Dragon resides, and it's where shulkers and elytra, also reside. And really, that's kind of it. In a typical game of Minecraft, you build up to make your way to the end. You defeat the dragon, then you come back and you get your trusty pair of wings. And then promptly leave. The end. To be the final journey of the game, there's just no meat on its bones. There's no particular reason to explore the end. There's not really much of an incentive. Aside for some small bits of treasure here and there, but let's face it, by this point in the game, you have everything you need in your base to render these treasures practically worthless. At one time, I would have said the plethora of diamonds wasn't too bad, but with the overhaul on ore and cave generation, diamonds are not as worthwhile as they once were. It's safe to say that the end needs love. Bad. And I think the entire community feels the same way. An overhaul seems in order, but it begs the question, what can they do? Today, I want to talk about what I feel is the best direction for an end update, and I feel like there's no better place to start than with the vibe. Now, for the uninitiated, when I say the vibe, I mean the aesthetic, the motif, and the feel. These three things are so fundamentally important for an overhaul like this. It's like a checks and balance for making sure that you're not straying too far from the source material. You want to keep the integrity of what the end is supposed to be. This way, it keeps you from making an overhaul that's something like rainbows and pink fluffy clouds and Candyland, basically. Earlier I complained that the end was barren and empty, and in a way they can really use that to their advantage if they keep that as the sort of vibe they're going for. You can do empty in a good way, and you can do empty in a bad way, and in its current state the end is empty in a very bad way. If I could break down what the end needs to be in 3 words, it would be desolate, isolated, and alien. When you see the end, you can tell that it's a place that you're not really supposed to be. It's floating islands in a black void with moon rocks. And for what small bit of structure they do have for buildings, they are so foreign and alien from anything man-made. They're vertical, they spread out and branch out like trees. This place is not of a familiarity to what you know. I believe the best change that they can do, right from the get-go, is the sound design and music. Those two things have been a large focus for a lot of Minecraft's updates over the past decade. If you were to hop into, say, a beta build of the game and listen to the sounds and the music that plays, it is vastly different than Minecraft that we have today. As George Lucas once famously said, sound design is 50% of the movie-going experience, and I think that holds true for video games as a medium. Maybe even more so. If they're going to add music tracks for the end, new tracks, it needs to be something that's kind of isolating, quiet, but also a little bit chaotic. I want a soundtrack for the end to completely grip me. I want to feel like I'm isolated and all alone in an alien world that's kind of hostile and not very welcoming. As far as an example goes, the thing that comes to my mind is the original Breath of the Wild soundtrack. How it was for the most part pretty silent, the wind sweeping across the ground, faint piano keystrokes playing every once in a while, sort of jarring but also not too noticeable. When I've seen people talking about an end update online, I feel like this part has always been overlooked every single time. I'm not really much of like a music guy. I'm kind of tone deaf, so that's really all I have to add for that specifically. So I think that kind of encapsulates what I feel about the vibe. Moving on, I think is probably the biggest thing that most people ask for, and that's biomes. Before I get into this, I want to state for the record that I am of the unpopular opinion that the end doesn't need a lot of biome work done. I think that maybe it could benefit from as little as 3 different biomes, and they should be in line with kind of the feel that it has now. So things like a desert type of biome, maybe a badlands, maybe even a mesa. Mesa? Mesa Mesa?
Mesa.
Mesa biome. I think there are 2 things that are far more important when it comes to the biodiversity of the end. Thing 1 is terrain generation, which absolutely needs to be overhauled. And 2 is more of a focus on flora/fauna. The reason that I say the terrain generation needs to be overhauled is because the end is extremely flat. And it shouldn't be. It's floating islands in a void. There should be way more verticality. Like, the vertical height limit and the lower depth limit is not being utilized at all, period. Considering that you get wings to fly around and glide around the game, and, you know, obviously rockets propel you, there should really be a focus on how high you can go when you're exploring the end. So I think the terrain generation should be a lot like an amplified world, where you have these crazy high peaks in these crazy low canyons. Why am I going so low? Theatrics. The vertical space can also amplify the feeling of isolation and eeriness. And I think a great example of that is the way that Subnautica handles vertical space. When surrounded by a vast void, and you can see really far down and really high up, you get this overwhelming sense of helplessness. And I think that's perfect for the update. Just a quick side note, I have thalassophobia, and so I couldn't even get into the game to record this footage. I had to ask my friend Quinn to do it for me. And while editing this, seeing this footage makes me so sick to my stomach. I feel like I want to puke. Now, when it comes to the second thing, the flora/fauna, I think that there is a lot of untapped potential in that. As far as the flora goes, the only thing I can really think of or that comes to mind is maybe some kind of cacti that grows similar to chorus, which would definitely help to populate the sort of deserty biome. But I think the real potential is in the fauna. I think it would benefit and kind of have a weird juxtaposition to put in a non-hostile mob in the end. So I went to the drawing board, and by drawing board I mean Blender, and I came up with this concept for what I call the Ender Hare. It's a lot like the regular rabbit mob, but it, much like Enderman, has the ability to teleport, and it's very skittish. But for right now, we're going to put a pin in this guy, and we're going to come back to him later on in the video. So just hang on to the thought of this little guy, okay? I promise you it will be worth it. Next, I want to talk about something pretty important, and that would be generated structures. And the reason I say these are so important is because it seems like that's a big focus for Mojang right now. In the last update, we got some new structure generation, and they're teasing already now for the next update a structure that we're going to be getting, known as the trial chambers. So I'd say that they're making it pretty clear that they're really honing in on ruins and different things to explore. They're bringing the factor of exploration to the forefront a lot more now than they have been. So I have a few concepts that I think would really fit the end as far as structures. Okay, for the first concepts, I thought maybe an observatory or an ancient observatory would be a really good structure. This ancient observatory that has just stared out into the vastness of nothing for eons, standing alone and isolated. My thought is that the end seems kind of spacey, so an observatory would really fit that thematically, and it's a little mysterious and ambiguous. Who built this? Was it the Endermen? Was it humans? Why did they build this? What were they looking for? The loot potential for this structure would be really interesting too. You can get the spy glasses, maybe maps in a similar vein to treasure maps. You get maps that lead you to different places in the end that you can dig up different kinds of treasures. And this would really spice up treasure chests in the end in general, because currently it's you scale an end city, kill like 4 shulkers, and then you find a chest and it has diamond and iron in it. So the next structure is purely for ambience. It's nothing special, it's nothing huge, it's just a small little area. The concept here is that you could make these structures spawn fairly rarely around the end, and it gives the idea that maybe there was another traveler here once, or there was someone who wasn't from this dimension, maybe another human who was doing their best to survive. This reinforces isolation through environmental storytelling. The final structure would be simply just a ruined village. I don't think the end would benefit from having any kind of new NPC to interact with, or villagers that spawned in the end for trading. I think that it just simply needs to be a ruined village that has building that's similar to how the end cities are constructed, but it's just empty. It's gone. The residents have long left, possibly perished, but thankfully have left their stuff behind for you, the player, to loot and use. Outside of these 3 structures, I think that end cities could use a little bit of like changing for variation so they don't all look the same. Something to give a little bit more variation so it doesn't just look like the same end city over and over and over and over again. Alright, so I said let's put a pin in the ender hair. Let's unpin it and finally talk about what I think it would be very useful for. Lastly, I'd like to propose a new tier of armor and tools known as Enderite. What's Enderite, you're asking? Well, it's Netherite, but for the end. That's it. I mean, what else are you expecting? The idea is that while Netherite helps you to explore the Nether, what with it being burn-proof and lava-proof, like you can still die in lava and fire, but at least you're not going to lose your items when you come back. In that same vein, Enderite would, perhaps, if you were to die in the void, teleport to the closest landmass or floating island. That way when you came back, you could collect your Enderite armor or tools. A nice added bonus is that the helmet would work much like putting a jack-o'-lantern on your head, where Endermen wouldn't attack you when you look at them. For all intents and purposes, the durability and strength should be on par, exactly equal with Netherite, so that you're given a choice of, do I want to keep the Netherite armor or do I want to put on the Enderite armor? I feel like that would create gear sets as opposed to, oh, well, I got Enderite, time to throw away my Netherite. That way, when you need to explore the Nether, you can switch to your Netherite gear, or when you need to explore the end, you can switch to your Enderite gear. But how do you get Enderite? Well, that's where the ender hair comes in. Much like how you have to search for ancient debris in the Nether to create nether scraps to then create nether ingots, or netherite ingots. Sorry, I had to look them up because I forgot what they were called. So instead of searching for ancient debris or some kind of ore, you have to search for ender hairs. What makes this interesting is now, instead of having to search through the ground and dig out these islands, you have to just look up and find an ender hair. But much like Endermen, they can teleport and you can't kill them with a bow and arrow. This now allows you to come up with ways to outwit the ender hair in order to slay it and collect its ender hair hide or ender hair foot. Also, like how Netherite gave more of a functionality to gold ingots, which prior were fairly useless, you'd have to combine 3 of these ender hair hides or ender hair feet with a copper ingot in order to produce an enderite ingot. And with that, concludes my idea for an end update. If you stuck around this long, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my video and hear my thoughts. It really means a lot. And what would also really mean a lot to me is if you could click like if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and leave a comment letting me know what you thought about the video or what your ideas for an end update could be. And if you like my content and you want to see more, you could always hit the subscribe. My name's Crowley, and I can't wait to see you next time.